Tonight at 10, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have decided to leave royal life for good. Buckingham Palace confirms that Prince Harry and Meghan will not return as working members of the royal family. The couple are being stripped of patronages and honorary titles. One friend says that will be a blow for Prince Harry.
I know that personally he will be gutted in many regards that certain things which he cares so much about, he will not be able to have such a direct involvement with anymore. You know, like his titles within the military, for example.
Buckingham Palace says everyone is saddened by their decision, but the couple remain much-loved members of the family. Also tonight, coronavirus cases fall right across the UK, but around 500,000 people are still infected. The UK's highest court rules that a group of Uber drivers must be treated as workers rather than self-employed, in a case that could have implications for many others. And remarkable new pictures from Mars, the moment NASA's robot Perseverance touched down on the red planet last night.
And coming up in sport on BBC News, Wolves on the hunt for back-to-back Premier League wins as they take on Leeds in a mid-table match at Molineux.
Good evening. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex will not be returning as working members of the royal family. Prince Harry and Meghan stepped down from royal duties last year and moved to the United States. The couple, who are expecting their second child, have been stripped of their patronages and honorary titles, which will be returned to the Queen and distributed elsewhere in the royal family. Prince Harry and Meghan responded with a statement saying, "We can all live a life of service. Service is universal." Here's our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell.
The bond which was once so close has, in every formal royal sense, been shattered. The breach in terms of the business of royalty is complete, and, bar a complete about-face by the Sussexes, it is final. For Harry, then, perhaps, a sense of long-sought freedom. For William, one imagines, a deep sense of disappointment. Today's news is not unexpected. In the year since Harry and Meghan made their last appearance at a formal royal engagement at Westminster Abbey, the gulf between them and the rest of Harry's family has grown ever wider. The couple have bought a house in California, negotiated deals with US media companies, and made it clear that they relish their new life. At midday today, Buckingham Palace confirmed that they would not be returning as working members of the royal family. The statement said that following conversations with Harry, the Queen has written confirming that in stepping away from the work of the royal family, it is not possible to continue with the responsibilities and duties that come with a life of public service. The statement finished, while all are saddened by their decision, the Duke and Duchess remain much-loved members of the family. This was the Sussexes' response. As evidenced by their work over the past year, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex remain committed to their duty and service to the UK and around the world, and have offered their continued support to the organisations they have represented, regardless of official role. They finished their statement by saying this: "We can all live a life of service. Service is universal." For Harry, the loss of his military roles, particularly as Captain General of the Royal Marines, will be particularly hard.
I know that he'll be personally gutted, just as I was, that he was not allowed to pull a military uniform on anymore. But regardless, that doesn't change his commitment to the individuals that serve in it and those that require care beyond it.
Supporters of Meghan understand why she wants a new life.
The press drove her out of here, and if she was going to stay here any longer, I think they would have probably made her ill, because it isn't a relationship that most Americans are used to.
So one of the royal family's most popular members, a man for whom, over the years, there's been great sympathy and admiration, now faces a very different future. The way back to royal duty has been closed. He can never again wear military uniform. Harry's future lies in California with his wife and family.
And Nick is with me now. How do you read the response from Prince Harry and Meghan?
I think, Sophie, that both statements are revealing of the underlying tensions and the completely mismatched ambitions. The Queen's position is very straightforward. You cannot do and just pick the bits of royal life that you particularly enjoy. You either do all of it or none of it. I think the palace statement reveals the feeling of exasperation that there is there, the telling reference from the palace or from the Queen to duties that come with a life of public service. Well, who is that reminding us of? A life of public service. The Queen, of course, her husband, and all the other members of the royal family who are not walking away. And then this stinging riposte from the Sussexes. We can all live a life of service. Service is universal. Well, one wonders who penned that particular flourish, which in fact, is saying to the palace, we don't need you to tell us what duty and service are. I think many people might think that it comes as close to impertinence as they dared. But an awful lot of people will have sympathy for them. An awful lot of people will wish them the very best of luck, as will the family, as will the Queen, the grandmother, which is quite distinct from the Queen, the embodiment of the crown. As the statement says, they remain much loved members of the family.
Nick Witchell, thank you. The Duke of Edinburgh is expected to remain in hospital over the weekend and into next week for observation and rest. He was driven to hospital on Tuesday night after feeling unwell for a few days. It's understood that Prince Philip's doctor is acting with what's been called an abundance of caution, and the Duke, who is 100 in June, remains in good spirits. NASA has tonight released remarkable new high-definition images from Mars taken by its rover Perseverance, which landed on the Red Planet last night. It's hoped it will find microscopic signs of ancient life from billions of years ago. It was an extraordinary and perilous landing, one that was helped by a company in Devon, as our science correspondent Rebecca Morell reports.
NASA's Perseverance rover being lowered to the surface of Mars, an image taken from above 2 meters away from touchdown.
That image and the details therein really pull us humans here on Earth into the result of all of that hard work. You are brought into the surface of Mars. You're sitting there. On the upper left of the image and the lower right of the image, you can see these little dust plumes in that on the surface of Mars, kicked up by our engines.
And here's one of the landing site. The shadow of Perseverance is clearly visible. And this close-up of its wheel is intriguing the team.
We'll be looking forward in the coming weeks and months as our instruments get checked out to look closer at these rocks. By the edge of the wheel is a rock, and one of the first things we noticed was that it has a lot of holes or vugs in it. And so the science team is now thinking about what this might mean.
It's the start of the rover's 2-year mission, and its main objective is to search for signs of life. Perseverance is in an area called the Jezero Crater. It was once a huge lake. You can see the river flowing into it and out of it. And this purple area is a beautifully preserved river delta where microorganisms could once have lived.
This is one of these existential questions. Are we alone in the universe? And what I can say is that all the raw materials, the building blocks are there for there to be life. So it would be, if there's going to be life, it should be in this type of environment.
The rover survived a perilous descent, travelling at the speed of a bullet before a supersonic parachute helped it to the ground. And this is where it was made. It's a fabric factory in Tiverton, Devon. It was a nerve-wracking moment for them.
I could hardly watch. And then it sort of really hit home. There was lots of things that could go wrong, but it all went right. And all of us, the whole team and everybody working at Heathcote was elated that we had another successful mission.
Over the next few days, the rover's instruments will be switched on and many more images will start to come back, including a video of its descent. Then Perseverance will be ready to start investigating its new home. Rebecca Morell, BBC News.
The number of coronavirus cases is continuing to fall in all parts of the UK. The latest R number, estimated to be between 0.6 and 0.9, also suggests infection numbers are shrinking. But experts warn that with more than 500,000 people currently infected, there is still plenty of virus circulating for people to catch. They say any lifting of restrictions should be done slowly and cautiously. Here's our health correspondent, Catherine Burns.
The pressure is easing on the NHS, but from a very bad situation. In January, hospitals in England treated 100,000 COVID patients, a third of all the people they'd seen with coronavirus since the pandemic started. It's better now, but far from normal.
There are still many hospitals around the country with intensive care units that have more COVID patients than they had at the peak of the first wave back in April. And there are still intensive care units who are at double their normal baseline capacity.
On Monday, we'll hear about the government's roadmap out of lockdown in England, with the promise that they'll be led by data, not dates. And that data is definitely going in the right direction. Essentially, cases halved over 3 weeks. The Office for National Statistics figures suggest that in the third week in January, 1 in 55 people across the UK would have tested positive for coronavirus. By the end of that month, it was rarer. Cases had fallen to under 1 in 65 people. And at the start of February, fewer still, 1 in 80 people. And in the most recent figures, for last week, it was 1 in 115. The numbers are going down across the UK. 1 in 115 in England. It's 1 in 125 in Wales. For Northern Ireland, it's 1 in 105. And Scotland has the lowest rates at 1 in 180. We've been in this position before, poised on the verge of restrictions easing. On May the 10th last year, the Prime Minister announced how we would come out of the first lockdown.
Provide the first sketch of a roadmap for reopening society.
But things are different now. Like then, case numbers are falling, but from a much higher level. Back in May, hospitals were treating almost 12,000 COVID patients. Now it's more like 19,000. On the other hand, though, we didn't have a vaccine then. Almost 17 million people have had their first dose, and about 600,000 of them have now had their second booster jab too. We're waiting for numbers showing what impact this is having on the virus, but the early signs are positive.
It's only been 2-3 months since we started vaccinating, and it takes quite a long time to collect the data needed to really get a good handle on how effective the vaccination is proving to be.
Whatever the roadmap out of lockdown looks like, it won't be a straight path. We can expect small steps with pauses in between. But the hope is, in a few months' time, life will look a lot more normal. Catherine Burns, BBC News.
The latest government figures show there were 12,027 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, a fall of 20% since last Friday. It means an average of 11,639 new cases were recorded per day in the last week. More than 19,000 people are in hospital with coronavirus across the UK. In the last 24 hours, 533 deaths have been recorded. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. That number is down by almost a third since this time last week. On average, 519 deaths were announced every day in the past week. The total number of people who've died is 119,920. More than 450,000 people have had their first dose of one of the 3 approved vaccines in the latest 24-hour period. So almost 17 million people have now had their first jab. Well, our health editor, Hugh Pym, is with me now. So a lot of new data today, and it's very significant because this is what the Prime Minister will be looking at ahead of his big announcement on Monday.
Yes, Sophie, 2 important surveys this week will feed into that decision-making, the REACT study by Imperial College yesterday and the ONS today. And they are broad studies in communities, picking up people who don't have symptoms, don't know they have the virus. And they've showed definite downward trends. In the case of the ONS, across the UK, a fall of 26% in just 1 week. The R number range, anything below 1, shows the virus is receding between 0.6 and 0.9. And that 0.6 bottom end of the range is the lowest since this data was first published back in May last year, though it is a range. So we'll hear more about the roadmap for England on Monday. And the key phrase is this data, not dates, with some sort of easing set for March the 8th, but then an assessment waiting for more data to come in. The Prime Minister said he wants to see infections really low. More time will be needed to assess that. And of course, an assessment will be needed ongoing about the pressure on the NHS and hospitals.
Thank you. The High Court has ruled that the government acted unlawfully when it did not reveal details of some of the COVID contracts it had signed while procuring personal protective equipment within the required timeframe. The court said the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, had acted unlawfully and he had breached his legal obligation. The Department for Health and Social Care said it had been forced to sign deals within very short timescales and against a background of unparalleled global demand. The First Minister of Wales says he hopes the country has entered its last 3 weeks of stay-at-home rules, but Mark Drakeford said further changes to lockdown will depend on case rates continuing to fall. Whilst younger primary school children return to school on Monday, he said all primary pupils and students in years 11 and 13 may be able to return from the 15th of March. Some non-essential shops and hairdressers could also reopen then. From tomorrow, up to 4 people from 2 different households can exercise outdoors together. But pubs, restaurants, cafes and gyms are likely to remain closed for a while. Our Wales correspondent Hal Griffith reports.
Yet another family walk. For Nicola and her children, this has been the routine of 2021. But in 3 weeks' time, if infection rates keep falling, 9-year-old Evan and 8-year-old Lila can take their first step back to school.
I think we'll be skipping into the school playground, and I think it's just great that the kids are able to get back to school and get back to some structure and normality in a school environment.
The classrooms are ready. The first pupils, those aged 3 to 7 years old, start back on Monday.
Oh, it will be wonderful to have children back in these classrooms.
That means about half of Jenny's pupils.
For now, the balance feels right, to be honest. I think we need to get it right with our younger pupils first so that we can reassure children, staff, families, the school community that it is as safe as we can possibly make it for the children to return to school.
Classrooms may be coming back to life, but this is going to be a slow and staggered process. Some secondary school students may not be back until after the Easter holidays. The Welsh Government is starting an incremental process of easing measures while still trying to give families some hope. Ministers won't give a detailed route map for exiting lockdown, just a direction of travel.
I hope, with all the ifs that I always have to emphasise, that this may be the last 3 weeks of the stay-at-home restrictions, because we would all like to be able to do more than we are doing now.
The First Minister says he looks forward to the green shoots of recovery. Here they just want to start selling them. Garden centres in Wales aren't allowed to open. They might get the go-ahead in 3 weeks, but you can't keep plants on pause.
Stock has been ordered months and months in advance because we know at some point we're going to open. So we have to have staff here to take that stock in, display it, get it ready, and then we don't know if we're going to open. Incredibly frustrating.
Caution, hesitation. There will be plenty of it in the weeks to come as we feel our way towards greater freedom. Hywel Griffith, BBC News, Cardiff.
Organisations representing healthcare staff say their lives are being put at risk because the PPE they use is providing inadequate protection against airborne transmission of coronavirus. The group, which includes the British Medical Association and the Royal College of Nursing, says more than 900 workers have died of COVID. Our science editor, David Shookman, reports.
Ambulance crews are first on the scene at the most serious COVID cases. And Phil Rennie from Oldham, Rod Moore from Falkirk and Alan Haig from Carmarthenshire are among more than 20 to die of the virus, leaving colleagues scared that they aren't better protected.
People call us through the college and describe themselves as cannon fodder, as canaries in a coal mine, as not worth anything. They feel devalued, demoralised.
The standard protection for ambulance crews includes a thin surgical mask, but many feel that's not enough when they've got COVID patients with them. Ambulances are thought to be a particular risk because you're indoors with little fresh air, close to people who are infected and for long periods of time. And when you combine all those factors, it's much more likely that you'll become infected. And the ambulances are often queuing for hours to deliver their patients, with paramedics inside the vehicles all that time. And some of them have caught the virus, like Georgette Eaton.
I just felt that I didn't have enough protection to protect me, especially because some of the things that I might need to do to treat them meant that I'd have to get quite close to them. So not only am I in a small metal box with a patient, I'm actually having to get quite close in order to treat them because they're really unwell and they need care.
The worry is that the virus is spreading through the air in tiny infectious particles called aerosols. But the big focus has been on hands and surfaces and keeping them clean.
People were washing their shopping, they were washing their pets, they were doing all sorts of things. But what they weren't doing was thinking that the virus might be floating in the air. And so we were so stuck on a mental model of droplets and things that we touch that we completely forgot the air that we breathe.
The government says there's no need to change the guidelines on PPE, but it is monitoring the emerging research into airborne transmission. And it says that safety is always the priority. David Shukman, BBC News.
Boris Johnson's main advisor on keeping the UK together has left his position despite only being appointed earlier this month. Oliver Lewis, in the middle here, also worked with Dominic Cummings during the Brexit Vote Leave campaign and later worked as an advisor to the government on Brexit policy before being placed in charge of Downing Street's so-called Union Unit. The United Arab Emirates has said that Princess Latifa, the daughter of the ruler of Dubai, is at home being cared for by her family. The UAE released a statement after secret videos were obtained by the BBC's Panorama programme, in which she accused her father of holding her hostage in the city. Princess Latifa was captured in 2018 after trying to flee. Our special correspondent Nawala Magafi is with me now, and there's growing pressure on the UAE to show proof that she is alive.
Exactly, and it comes after these videos that the BBC released earlier this week, where we hear from Princess Latifa for the first time in 2 years. In those videos, she tells us that she's being held captive in a villa in central Dubai, in solitary confinement with barred up windows, and that she fears for her life. Now, that phone that she sent those messages on has been silent for a couple of months now, so there's growing concern about her well-being. The United Arab Emirates have always maintained and insisted that she's being looked after by her family, but now there's pressure on them to prove that. This morning, the Office of the UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights said they released a statement saying that they've requested from the UAE to prove that she is alive. A few hours after that, the UAE released a statement saying that she's at home with her family and with medical professionals, that our reporting from the last couple of days is not reflective of the actual position. And they also say she'll return to public life at an appropriate time. But as of yet, Sophie, there's no actual proof that's been provided to show that she's alive.
Nawala Magafi, thank you. The Supreme Court has ruled that a group of Uber drivers must be treated as workers rather than self-employed, a decision which means they could be entitled to a minimum wage and holiday pay. The decision marks the end of a 5-year legal battle. The case could have implications for many others. With more, here's our transport correspondent, Caroline Davis.
Supreme Court unanimously dismisses Uber's appeal.
Relief after years of fighting. Today, outside the Supreme Court, Yassine and James heard the decision they'd been waiting for, that when driving for Uber, they were workers, not self-employed.
I'm delighted, to be honest. It's victory. And I think it sends a strong signal to companies like Uber, these big, massive companies, that, you know, the workers can fight them.
They spent millions of pounds to try and defeat workers. I mean, it's reprehensible that they've done this, but I'm just so delighted, thrilled and relieved.
Worker status is not the same as an employee, but it means that they had the right to a minimum wage and holiday pay. the ride-hailing app which connects drivers with passengers, Uber has always claimed it's an intermediary, but that was rejected by the Supreme Court. Uber say this judgment only applies to the drivers that first brought the case in 2016, not to every Uber driver in the country, because Uber say they've made changes since then. Some drivers and lawyers would disagree. Today, the court set out the reasons why it thought these Uber drivers were workers, which included the fact that Uber set the pay and the contract without any say from the drivers. How today's verdict will affect today's drivers and other workers will be the subject of future court cases. Other companies in the gig economy may already be working out what this might mean for them.
They're going to have to look at their business model. If they think that they can continue with this self-employed model, it's quite clear that the judiciary isn't afraid to intervene into this to find that their self-employed individuals are actually workers.
The court says that a driver is working from when they log into the app, not just when they have a passenger. Some drivers are worried that if Uber have to pay a minimum wage for those hours, they could cut down on drivers or change the way Uber operates. Samuel has driven for Uber for the last 5 years and is concerned.
It doesn't impress me. The only reason why I'm attracted to drive on the app is the flexibility.
Uber say that they respect the court's decision and will now consult with every active driver across the UK to understand the changes they want to see. Today's case sets a legal precedent that could have huge implications for Uber and for other firms that rely on flexible labour. The company that was once thought of as the big disruptor might now have been disrupted.
Yes. Well done.
Caroline Davis, BBC News.
Reports from the US say that the reality TV star Kim Kardashian has filed for divorce from the rapper Kanye West. The couple, who are amongst the most recognisable stars in the world, have been married for almost 7 years and have 4 children together. Neither has commented publicly. The small Derbyshire village of Eyam is experiencing the COVID pandemic against the backdrop of a tragic history. 300 years ago, Eyam's residents quarantined themselves to protect neighbouring communities during the Great Plague. Our special correspondent Fergal Keane visited Eyam nearly a year ago to meet residents preparing to face the coronavirus crisis. He's gone back to see how they're coping.
The silence of midwinter snowdrifts in valleys already stilled by the pandemic. And Eyam locked down with its memories of sacrifice from centuries ago. When we last came to Eyam in the springtime of 2020, none here foresaw the scale of the national tragedy that was looming. Back then at Eyam School, there was a place for all the children, and a dynamic headmistress working to keep them focused and hopeful.
Good morning, squirrels. It's great to see you all joining so promptly, and I can see
Now in this classroom, it's only the children of critical workers who are attending.
Good morning, Mrs. Gilbert. Good morning, Mrs. Gilbert.
Good morning. And George, good morning.
It's a mix of school and home learning for these children, with all the challenges.
When we started home learning, we would always giggle and not do our work, so now I do my work upstairs in the spare room and he does it in the dining room. I think we both distract each other. It's really hard, really hard. I try to think of something that I enjoy, make me feel really energetic and happy.
It's made them a little bit nervous of new situations, and certainly we've noticed children are quite nervous about having visitors or different things, which they weren't. They would have been quite confident before. Hi, Daddy.
Hello. She's not only a headmistress and a mother of 2 teenagers, but also a daughter, visiting her 88-year-old father who lives on his own.
He's had enough mishaps to know that you never know if it's going to be your last time when you wave goodbye. So we've got fish pie tonight. He's desperate for the end of lockdown so we can have a proper hug with the grandchildren and myself. But it's hard. I'll come back in a second, Daddy. Okay?
Okay.
The tourism so important to the area has vanished for now. But isolation and strict following of the rules has meant rates of infection are lower than the rest of the country. And vaccination is stirring hope.
That's from AstraZeneca itself, so read that at bedtime, but read this one with a cup of tea when you get home.
Last spring, the rector of Eyam was self-isolating after his wife caught COVID.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks.
We're standing back from you, as you can appreciate.
Since then, they've mourned 2 parishioners who had COVID, and there is a pressing desire for normality.
Yeah, it's been tough, and I think this last few weeks have been the toughest in some ways, because there was a real sense in the first lockdown, almost a blitz spirit, wasn't there? And people go, yeah, we can do this. Now there's a weariness.
The Lord is my light and my salvation.
In the same church where a distant predecessor preached in plague times, there is consolation via a daily online service. Sheila Vipin celebrated her 96th birthday under lockdown. And just as she was when I first met her, she is irrepressible.
How are you, my dear? It's been many, many months.
Yes, it has, but such a lot has happened since then. I always remember what my mother said. I'm never lonely, but I am alone. And when I think of that, then I feel uplifted.
Would you say is your secret to staying happy?
Well, I think being in the present and not trying to think too much of what might be or what has been, but just taking it in, all that's here now, and making the most of it.
Nearly all the daily encounters that give a community life are suspended. But here, older, deeper bonds are proving resilient, waiting for the spring. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Eyam.
And that's it from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Good night.